What we're going to do this morning is kind of tying together several of my most favorite topics. I love the first 1,000 years post-flood. It's fascinating. And I also love this question of government, what it is. It's such an odd thing that God keeps pulling it apart from every direction over the last few years, really drawing my attention to it. And the gospel, all three of those things kind of play out post-flood. So we're going to delve into that, and this is the first time this has been presented because I'm pulling apart three different. I got so much material. I got the Ice Age and what happened, why we ended up with underwater cities, and everything going on post-flood. There's so much stuff. So I kind of pulled it apart into three things. So this is the first time I'm presenting just this aspect of it. But let's start off. Where are you guys at? Okay, next one. So what we're going to kind of zero in on is the Tower of Babel and the Nephilim. And it's surprisingly relevant. You'd think some boring little verse out of Genesis 10 would have like zero relevance to us today. But it is literally playing itself out day by day in our lives, personal and national levels. So let's go to the next one. And some of the questions we're going to try to hit is, how fast did we go into apostasy and what horrific sin launched it? And then kings, we've got kings everywhere. Snake worship, the true origin of government. Was the Tower of Babel real? What does it matter if they apostatized? What does it matter to us? So we're going to start off with, you got to know what the mind of Satan is. You got to put yourself in his shoes post-flood. The tables have just been reversed. He almost pulled it off. He almost succeeded. He had almost the entire world for his kingdom. And there's only now, did he get that all upended and destroyed? He's only got 8 to focus on. Now, this is a complete transformation of circumstances. And we know from, in Jesus' time that just that one demoniac had a legion of demons in him. So 2,000-3,000 or more. He's got plenty to spare. So there's a lot of them, and there's only 8 people to focus on. So this is one of the reasons why post-flood we have such a rapid descent into apostasy. So he's probably determined to not fail this time around. He wants control of this planet, and especially because this is absolutely brilliant. I hadn't thought of this from his perspective, but again, what I've been doing is trying to strip away all the Christian pat phrases. I've stripped away the spirit of prophecy, every term that you're normally familiar with, because I'm addressing an audience that is either biblically illiterate or barely literate. So I can't use the Seventh-day Adventist terms or regular terms. I can't use spirit of prophecy. I can't use any of that. I have to be able to justify what I'm saying from the Word of God, and I got to make it relevant to them. Which, by the way, do you all know what the Lost World Museum is? I'm sorry, I didn't. You do all know what it is? Okay. All right. So, again, I'm dealing with a lot of atheistic people. I'm dealing with hungry people, but clueless. So if this sounds odd, what I'm saying, I'm stepping back from the way you've probably heard it, and I'm just addressing it the way I'm finding it in the Bible. And what I'm finding is that there was a war in heaven, and God did not wipe him out of existence. And Revelation reveals that he has to face, those two teams are going to face off again. The war is not done. And so not only did he succeed in causing Adam and Eve to sin, this couldn't work better for him. He now has a human baby factory. Like, he's got a soldier factory. He's got the ability to increase the numbers on his side. This matters to him. Like, every single person matters to him. So he's going to definitely work post-flood to try to increase, because whether it's just soldiers in some kind of physical battle, or whether it's just saying by the sheer weight of evidence that yeah, those that want my side are way outweighing those that want your side. He's in his delusion, he thinks he can still pull this off. He's going to fight to the end to do this. So, yeah, we matter, all of us. So we may not take, and this is what I'm trying to say to those online, we may not take the spiritual war that's going on behind the scenes very seriously, but I guarantee you he does, and his angels do. All right, so next one. So I can back everything I say with Bible verses, but this one point I'm going to mention here is just based on praying and thinking about the story of what happens not too long after, the ark lands. Genesis says that the very first thing that Noah does is he offers a sacrifice from the very few animals he's got. And the part that I am guessing at, but I think I'm fairly accurate on, is that likely not all of them shared this generous, beautiful heart attitude that Noah's got going. I don't think Ham, because you know how scared you are sometimes to trust God with providing something that you need or, coming through for you. If you got this little food left in this delicate of a situation, I'm guessing Ham probably wasn't thinking, well, he probably was saying, well, I'm grateful too, but do we have to do like some of everything here? Can we just back this off here? How about just one? Anyway, under the guise of practicality, we often hide our fear. But either way, what I find stunning about this is that God smelled the aroma of this sacrifice and saw it as a beautiful act. Let's go to the next slide. If you're not familiar with this picture, this is called the pale blue dot. Oh, I'm not sure. Can you see that? Let me point. Yeah. The little, that blue circle has a dot in the center of it. Mm-hmm. That dot in the center of it is Earth from when Voyager 1 looked back, took a picture from almost 4 billion miles away. It literally looks like a speck of dust in a sunbeam when you're vacuuming the floor. Genesis 8:21, and the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Now, you can just blah, blah, blah over verses like that if you're not careful. But for the Lord to smell that says something about his power and his attention to the human race. I mean, it's just amazing. Next slide. We'll zoom out a little bit more. And again, when you consider all that God is superintending in this universe and the number of galaxies, every speck in that, like the big ones, there's 5 big galaxies right there. But all those other little dots are all galaxies, not stars, galaxies, in just one little tiny section of the universe. So to trace the story of apostasy and the war that Satan is waging and all that God is doing to fight and overturn this, in light of all he's doing, on a universe level, the fact that he's bothering with one planet is just stunningly beautiful. So the first few chapters of Genesis is telling us basically how we got to the point where 1,600 years in, he's having to destroy the planet. And there's a lot of little clues post-flood. Some of them are pre-flood. It's surprisingly that the post-flood picture not only mirrors the pre-flood picture, but it also fills it in and tells you what was going on. So let's go to the next one, and we're going to talk about Ham's sin, because what launched the post-flood apostasy? So if you want to go to Genesis 9. So everything the Bible records is important, and if you look post-flood, well, pre-flood and post-flood, if you look what God is drawing your attention to, he's showing you the apostasy of man and the faithfulness of him. That's the two things. Each event that he brings up is for a reason. He's filling in the blanks on this. So one of the first things he draws attention to is Genesis 9:20 through 22. And Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brothers outside. Okay, so you cannot understand the depravity of the post-flood descent into apostasy unless you understand this story and the context of what's going on in the environment around it. So let's go to the next slide. And by the way, why is this thrown in the father of Canaan? If you look in verse 22, it says, Ham, the father of Canaan. Isn't that very bizarre? Canaan is the fourth son of Ham. We're just post-flood. We don't have the kids yet. I mean, where are we at? That's what we're going to investigate too. But as you read verse 23, but Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away and they did not see their father's nakedness. So clearly there's a visual element to this story. And so most people think, understandably, that this just means he saw him naked or something like that, maybe something a little worse. They speculate a little bit on that. But let's let the Bible define what happened. Go to Leviticus 18. Leviticus chapter 18. And we're going to go to verse 8. The nakedness of your father's wife you shall not cover. It is your father's nakedness. Now these are the laws of sexual morality, and the whole chapter is like, don't be intimate with this person, don't be intimate with that person. You shouldn't have to tell grown adults this, but unfortunately, he has to tell them, don't do this, don't do that. Again, don't be intimate with all these people. Well, when it says the nakedness of your father's wife you shall not uncover, it is your father. The father's nakedness is being intimate with your mother. That's what it's saying. If you want a little more clarity, you can go to chapter 20, verse 11. The man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. And then verse 20 and 21, if a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sins. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. Clearly, over and over again, the Bible tells us what happened. So if you want to figure out what happened in Genesis, that's what happened. So that's the best and most biblical explanation that I have ever read online regarding what happened. And the major point, we're actually coming in halfway through the story if we come in verse 20. Back up a couple of verses to verse 18. And the actual major point that God is making is he's trying to say who the whole world, all the races descended from. He says, now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, from these the whole earth was populated. Why again would you stop to throw in Ham was the father of Canaan? He's throwing this in because he's trying to say how the earth was populated post-flood, and he doesn't want the bastard son of Mrs. Noah included in Noah's lineage. The three sons of Noah are Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan, not Noah. That's what it's saying. So when the Bible says something like that, it often goes back and elaborates. The Bible does that frequently. It's a pattern. It will say something and then fill out the picture. Well, that's what 20 through 22 is. God goes back, fills in the picture of what happened. Well, they got drunk. They finally got quite a vineyard going. They're getting their feet, their sea legs, so to speak. They're getting, things in motion. But as time's going on here, they get drunk and this happens. So otherwise, you've got a simple statement of who the sons of Noah are being oddly complicated with adding in that Ham was the father of Canaan. So go to the next one. So otherwise, in verse 25, when we get down to Noah wakes up and he finds out what has happened, and he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall that he be to his brethren. Again, fourth son. Why would you do this? This is a clue in saying we're a few years post-flood. Now, whether we've got 3 sons at this point from Ham, this is the 4th son. So are we 4 years post-flood? Are we 5, 6, 7 years post-flood? Nobody really knows. We're not told the details of this. But over the first few years post-flood, you get to the point where this is taking place. And so Noah cursed him. Okay, let's go to the next one. So why is this such a big deal? I mean, other than it's scandalous and he shouldn't have done it. And it's bizarre for us, morality, speaking. But the real perspective that needs to be given is what's going on geologically. So let's go to the next slide. The earth is still in geological upheaval. And to try to give you an example of that, I took just one slide from each of these different concepts, because I got a whole presentation on this too, of what was going on post-flood geologically. But the earth is in geological upheaval. There are splits in the earth. There's cracks. As the earth dried out, it's still splitting. We have cracks around the world that are still getting bigger at this point. So, and it's not going to settle down for several hundred years. Next slide. Huge canyons tear the landscape. And every time lightning splits the skies, it causes terror. I mean, you have to put yourself in their position. Pre-flood, you had happy sunshine. You had mist coming up out of the ground in the morning to water the planet. You had nothing like this. You'd never heard thunder. You'd never seen lightning. Every raindrop that comes down at this point is God really going to be true to his promise? Now, maybe Noah believed that promise, and maybe even Mrs. Noah, but I'm telling you, post-flood, very rapidly, they did not trust that God was going to keep his promise. So there's, you've seen kids afraid of storms and, hiding from the thunder. Dogs sometimes hide from the thunder. But there is no fear level that you're acquainted with that would describe what the post-traumatic stress disorder, so to speak, is what they're experiencing. Because if you don't fully, it's one thing, I trust God. Oh, yes, God loves me. Trust God. Oh, yes. We can say it all we want. But when rubber meets the road, sometimes we start doubting whether he's going to provide what we need and solve this situation. We all do it. You can't tell me they weren't doing it. So this is trauma. Next one. There are still raw reminders. Things that you had never seen in the pre-flood world scar the planet at this point. There are things that I'm sure actually that they were able to look out there's a part in the top of the ark that allowed them to look out. There was a covering. I think they watched some of the initial stages. That's just a guess, but I'm certain that I wouldn't have sat there just twiddling my thumbs if I was hearing all this stuff going on around me. I probably would have peeked. Regardless, people as the flood ramps up are fleeing from things like volcanoes. And in the post-flood world, they're still there, and some of them are still active. In fact, Josephus says that they didn't, for a long time, they did not come down off that mountain. Can you blame them? Next slide. There are 5 volcanoes in the near vicinity from, if Mount Ararat truly in Turkey is where they landed, there are 5 volcanoes in the near vicinity, including the one you landed on. Now, I would say that Mount Ararat is not active at this point, but some of the other ones possibly are, and you certainly are having tremendously more earthquakes than we have now. So the sights and sounds of fear are around you. Next one. This is why so many cultures post-flood, like if you just Google randomly, did the early cultures, were they obsessed with astronomy and stuff? And it'll tell you they had a profound obsession with astronomy. They tracked the planetary movements. They could predict the eclipses. They were, focused on that, because one of the things that had happened that set the flood in motion, and actually happened all the way through the flood, is this earth was bombarded with asteroids of epic sizes. That's in my flood presentation, but if you were in apostasy, this is what you'd be doing. Like, is it going to happen again? Watching, for and tracking anything in the skies, because that's what set this whole thing in motion. That's when the fountains of the deep broke up. That's what caused it. We were hit. This planet was hit. So this is just one example. Is the serpent of light. They had this set up so that as the light would hit it during certain times of the year, it would make a snake dance across. It would I don't know, it looked like a snake anyway, the light, and it would make it dance. This is what you get post-flood, and as we go through the centuries, just go through the next couple of slides, we've got like this one, snakes everywhere. You've got them winged snakes on the next one. Next one, this is on display in Mexico City. It's a feathered snake. Just again, it's just everywhere. Go to the following one, Aztec, and then let's do one more. Worldwide obsession with snakes. So why would you have this obsession with snakes? It's because of apostasy. It filtered everywhere. We have human sacrifice, which is a bastardization of that beautiful system that God had given the pre-flood world, because he's only ever had one plan: save as many as I can. They had the sacrificial system in the pre-flood world. They had it in the post-flood world, but I don't have time to go into all that. So anyway, the worldwide obsession with snakes is one of the many stamps, as Satan influenced each culture. It's like, yeah, this one's mine. Oh yeah, this one's mine. Yep, this one too. He's marking his territory. And it's amazing that the very thing that took us down and destroyed us as humanity is the thing they're worshiping. There's a lot of other scary animals or powerful animals that cultures could have worshipped. Why a snake? Because Satan thinks this is funny. So go to the next one. Again, all over the world, he gets a kick out of this. All right, so let's go to the next slide. What does God point out happens next in this plunge into apostasy? Well, in Genesis 10, God, first he, mentions some of the, Gentiles came from this group and this group, and this is what happens here and there. But we get to verse 8 through 10, and Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Well, when it says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, I thought, oh, well, okay. I mean, he hunts, okay. I never really understood what was going on. I didn't really get the broader storyline that's being brought up, but he was a warrior and he was a leader. And what the story is that he's starting a kingdom. In verse 10, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, and he doesn't stop there. It keeps going. He's on a power trip. So let's go to Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And this is why I'm saying the post-flood world is a mirror of the pre-flood world. And I believe it's probably because Ham was probably telling stories. Probably even some of the other ones. They talked about what it was like and how we got into such trouble and why God had to destroy it. It's not that it was hidden or needed to be hidden, but I think Ham's lineage thought, oh, I like that. That's cool. Anyway, in chapter 6, 1 through 4, says, Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto him, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives of all they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he's indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children unto them. Those were the mighty men of old, men of renown. So, you're on the next slide. Okay. So, if you don't load into these verses the book of Enoch, which is what everybody online does. I mean, most of Christianity is either familiar with or completely bought into the idea that the sons of God are angels, saw the daughters of men, humans, sexually immoral with them, and then the offspring were these giants. And I'm telling you, obsessive levels of, like, you can't pry their fingers off this idea. It's like taking away their favorite toy. They absolutely have a fit when you try to give the obvious and simple meaning. If you don't load the Book of Enoch into it, what you've got is a basic, simple power and sexual immorality story going on. So, God didn't like what they were doing, and there was many things that they were doing pre-flood, but who did God say these people were? It's like he says, all these people were multiplying, there's intermarriage going on, and the Lord said, my spirit will not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Just let the story tell itself. Let God tell the story, not you, not your titillating, fun fantasy ideas. These people are man, indeed flesh. I really think God put that in because he knew what Satan was going to do with this story. Let's go to the next one. What the verse actually says is not Nephilim. The New King James says giants. What it says is there were Nephilim on the earth in those days and afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bore children unto them. They were the mighty men of old. Well, what is Nephilim and what is mighty men? So in order to strip that word, because that word Nephilim is loaded with baggage. So in order to get people to step away from everything they've ever heard about it, substitute the word in gobbledygook if you have to. But build the picture from scratch. Because Nephilim does not mean giants. Well, there were giants pre-flood and post-flood, absolutely. And some, like I said, some versions of the Bible substitute the word giants in there. But although there were pre-flood and post-flood giants, it's not solely giants it's talking about. And the Hebrew says a bully or tyrant. Now, men love power. Power, sex, and money. Like, has it ever changed? Like, this is what happens every time period. So let's look a little bit closer at the mighty men. Let's go to the next one. So Genesis 6, again, we looked at those first few verses, but we got to figure out who were those mighty men of old. So let's go to the following one, because what's happening is people, again, the holy people are starting to go into the daughters of men. They're starting to apostatize. They're leaving the separation that they had in the pre-flood world. They used to live separately, and they're starting to mingle, just like Samson and Delilah, same thing. They're starting to mingle in towns and places where they're finding, very beautiful people. Oops. Okay. So God's original plan was be fruitful and fill the earth, Genesis 9:1. So loving guidance from basically the heads of families as you learn and prepare to be the head of a family of your own someday. Even extended clans, or even maybe what you call a small tribe. But they're going to continually break off, and there's going to continually be the loving guidance of the head of the family. That was the original idea. Fill the earth. Don't congregate in one spot. So next one. Nimrod apparently is not okay with that. He's not okay with the idea of sitting around peacefully in obscurity. He doesn't want family units, concept. He wants the pre-flood power and prestige that he's, like I said, likely heard about from Ham. So starting the Tower of Babel is starting something very, very interesting. You're seeing government. You're seeing people grouped in a different way. They're grouped by political units, under a sovereign, under some kind of power person. We have rulership. We have a different kind of community. We now have government. And again, I believe this was going on in the pre-flood world, but now we're seeing it post-flood, and Nimrod was the first one to do this. So let's go to the next one. This gets to the point, it's so out of control that God has to intervene, and it says, in Genesis 11, verse 4, God, they're saying, let's build us a city, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the earth, directly contrary to what God had said to do. They don't want to be spread out. They don't want to be fruitful and multiplied, each have their own little plot of land, and everybody's working and providing their own food, and nobody's having slaves or control over other people. God's plan was prosperous, individual, providing for your own family. He doesn't want that. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built, and the Lord said, indeed, the people are one, and they have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing they propose to do will be withheld from them. God knows the significance of this, because they are reproducing the pre-flood world. The apostasy in the form of tyrants is set in motion at this point. So Satan keeps getting thwarted. God destroys the tower. And this does slow this down. The confusion of the languages did spread them out. But it doesn't stop the apostasy. In fact, this is not only going to grow, but this fight against God is going to continue down through the centuries and the scriptures until it's the mighty Babylon of Revelation. The government of Satan against the government of God. We'll come back to that in a minute, but let's continue by looking at Genesis 12, because God has to pull Abraham out. We're not going to be able to successfully govern the heads of families as far as like God working through each person, righteously governing their family. It's not working. Satan is too successful. We're going downhill too fast. Well, what additional piece of the story of apostasy do we get as evidence that this is going downhill and God is not able to reach only but a few people? Well, one of the examples is when Abraham tells his wife, lie, tell them you're my sister. Well, why does he say that? Well, because Genesis 12:12 is the exact same thing that was happening in Genesis 6:2. So Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all they chose. I like your wife. I'm going to take her. Don't care what you think. I'll just kill you. Abraham's afraid the Egyptians are going to kill him and take her because it's happening all over again. You can't separate the post-flood apostasy from the pre-flood apostasy. It's the same story playing out over and over and over again. So God, let's go on to the next one. God has to pull out Abraham and say, all right, I'm just going to take those that are willing to be my representatives, kind of like my ambassadors, my mouthpiece to the world. I got to have a group of people that are willing. So it's not by heads of family. It's going to be by a group of people, but they were not to be reckoned among the nations. That's a very important point that the Old Testament makes. He never intended for them to be reckoned among the nations. They were a government under God, a people group that knew no king. They did not need police. They shouldn't have needed any of the things that we need to govern society. So, one of the beautiful things, glimpses that we get into this time period is actually from Hebrews, and I thought I'd bring that in because in all this apostasy, you see a determined God. It's like, Satan thinks he's got checkmate, and God's like, no, back it down, boys. And every time Satan tries to pull off something, God does something back to set things back on track. And one of those beautiful glimpses into that is Hebrews 6:13 through 17. For when God made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swears by himself. I swear on my life. That's what he's saying. Surely blessing I will bless you. And then let's skip ahead a little bit. Thus God, determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability or unchangeability of his counsel, he confirmed it by an oath. So let's go to the next. We'll continue reading a couple more verses. That by two unchangeable things in which it's impossible for God to lie, that we might have strong consolation. He wanted us to have a very strong anchor, something to run to, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. He's like, okay, what's the strongest possible way I can tell you? Strongest possible words, strongest possible language, strongest possible way to tell you, I've got this. I am not going to fail you. I'm not going to abandon you. I don't care how dark the darkness gets. I don't care how deep the apostasy goes. I will do this. I will pull it off. Because he couldn't come up with anything else, he swears on his own life, I will do this, so that we could have a strong consolation, those of us that have fled to him for refuge. So, doesn't matter what each blow that Satan does back then or now, those of us that have to endure the darkest apostasy of human history, when all the nations are arrayed against us, we have this a promise that we have a determined God who's going to finish this and he's going to win. So let's go to the next one. The story isn't finished yet. I want to just skim through a few more things quick. There's kings everywhere. It's fascinating by chapter 14, because again, you're looking at what story God is telling. And he's telling you how far off track we got and how. Well, in chapter 14, 1 through 4, all these kings are listed. And this is the story. We won't go into the story, but you remember those kings, 4 kings against 5, and they're fighting against each other, and in the process, you end up having Sodom and Gomorrah get attacked, and so all of that taking place. But there's the king of Shinar, and Elisar, and Elam. They got all these different kings, but one of them is the king of Bela, which the Bible says is also the word Zoar. It's 2 names for it. And this is particularly fascinating, because what this is saying is every last city, town, or village, big to small, every last one of them has a king. It's unbelievable, the power trip that this is going on. And the important clue, if we go to the next, so even the little ones have a king, and how we know this, if you go to chapter 19, verse 20, that Zoar comes up. And now Lot has been told, flee to the mountains. Oh no, can't do that, too afraid. No, please, can I just go to that Zoar? I mean, it's just a little one. It's just a little one, please. He's, if you want to talk about answering the question of who God is, which is what God's doing with this whole story of Abraham, well, you wouldn't destroy a city if there were 50, would you? Would you do that? Like he's starting to really think through for the first time, I'm not sure I actually know who you are. Would you do that? You're telling me you're going to destroy all those cities? Well, isn't there anybody there worth saving? Well, what about if there's 50? And he goes down and down, gets down to 10, doesn't dare ask for any less. God answers that question by dragging 4 of the most pathetic versions of Christians out of that city that you could come up with. I mean, Lot's too afraid to even go to the mountains where he's told to flee to, and he has to go to that little city. One of them's so ungrateful, she looks back, it's turned to salt. The 2 daughters are so unfaithful that God will provide them wives that they get their father drunk so they can be intimate with him and have a child through him. I mean, we're not talking stellar versions of Christians. But God is answering the question who he is versus who Satan is. And these 2 governments, these 2 things are constantly at play. So in verse 20 of chapter 19, it says, see now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one, and my soul shall live? So he wants to go there. And then in verse 22, hurry, escape, therefore I cannot do anything until you arrive. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. So this is the one that it was supposed to be destroyed. And it's one of those that has a king, and it's a little one. So that's our clue that even the smallest of villages have kings and power trips. So, but most importantly, despite what happens is fascinating. In verse 30, Then Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. Why is he afraid to dwell in Zoar? Apparently they don't stop sinning, despite the fact that all the other cities of the plain were just destroyed in hellfire and brimstone. Their consciences are so seared that he's like, I don't think I ought to stay here. This is a really bad idea because these guys are going to be destroyed. There's no way God's going to leave this alone. So he finally flees. So all of these are clues. When you stop and drill in and munch on it instead of just blah, 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 skimming over the top of the surface, you'll start to see this rich, beautiful tapestry being woven again of God's faithfulness and man's unfaithfulness. All right, so let's go to the next one. Oh, I didn't take the smell of gratitude off that. That's okay. So Romans 1 is in full motion. Go to Romans 1. It's fascinating to see so many parts of the Bible refer back to Genesis. It's such a critical time period. So Romans 1, and we're just going to read this really quick, but start with 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. They're suppressing it. They know the truth, but they're suppressing it. Because what may known of God is manifest to them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes have been clearly seen. Skip down to 21. Because although they knew God, did they know God? Yes, they knew God. Although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were they thankful. They were not thankful that they were alive post-flood. Well, I mean, they liked being alive, but they weren't grateful to God for that. But became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator. Keep note of that, because in a minute I'm going to bring that back up. Who is blessed forever. For this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women changed the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of the error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which were not fitting. So, they knew God, didn't care. I know who you are, don't care. I know what you want, don't care. But lest we think that they're evil and we look down our snooty little noses at them, let's tie it into us as we try to finish this up here. Let's go to the next slide. Does this look familiar? Does this remind you of any passage of the Bible? What's that? It's found in that area, but what passage of the Bible, besides, what we've been talking about, the Tower of Babel, somewhere else? Is it ringing a bell? A description of God? And the throne? And the wheels within wheels? Ezekiel? Ezekiel 1, 5 through 10. I don't know if you want to just look really quick there. It'll start explaining to you, again, there's too much to really effectively do in one sermon, but, in Ezekiel 1, verse 5 through 10, it describes the likeness of the four living creatures, and each, they had the likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces, each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of the man were under their wings on the four sides, and each of the four had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. Their creatures did not turn as they went, but they went straight forward. In the likeness of their faces, each one had the likeness of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left, and each of the four had the face of an eagle. So anyway, you can read on in there. It goes into a little bit more detail and stuff, but it's very, very similar to these pagan deities that I think that the pre-flood world, they knew more about God than we realize. And so post-flood, when they lost it, they lost the storyline, they lost, the purity of God, the gospel, and who God is, what he's like, his character, you end up seeing their deities represented by things that, are very clearly a bastardization of God, the throne, that everything that we think only showed up later in history. So anyway, let's go on to the next one, because I want to skim rapidly through to the end of time and apply it to us. Israel does this. All of history does this. Every nation is really, every government is admitting failure. It's with every law. It doesn't matter whether Democrats, Republicans, or any other country, no matter what name you give the government or what side is running it, every time somebody's naughty and they make a new law, you might as well have every one of them run down the street with a sign, I'm a failure. I can't keep peace. I can't talk to my spouse correctly. I can't not abuse my children. I can't not steal pens from my office. I can't not take money from people I don't have any right to take it from. Put any label you want on it. But it is an admission of failure. It is an admission that the government of Satan doesn't work. It's an admission from humanity that I cannot rule my soul in righteousness. What we need is the reign of Christ in the soul. And all of history is proving this. So Israel, if you were to skim forward a little bit further, post-flood, you get Israel coming out of Egypt. Oh, praise the Lord, parting the Red Sea. He just worked on our behalf, 10 plagues. Very rapidly, they get to the point where they don't even trust him to give them the land he promised he'd give them. We get further off track and further off track and further off track to the point where, I don't want God to be my king. We want a king. And if you read the story carefully, which I can't really go into time-wise right at the moment, if you read the story, they want somebody to protect them, and they want to fight their battles for them, and to judge them. And you know why they're having to have somebody fight their battles and have a military? Because God had promised, like even when the 3 times a year when the men were to go to, worship, at the temple, the women, the elderly, the children, those that couldn't make that travel, they were promised that they would be safe. But their safety is departed from them because they're in apostasy. And so their own failure to allow God to rule in their hearts, which therefore brought upon them the tax of their enemies, they now charge all of that failure. Oh yeah, your government doesn't work. So I want one of those governments. I like all that pomp and circumstance. That looks pretty cool. All that royal clothing and fancy rulers and all that. I like that. Give me that. So they say, and God tells them in 1 Samuel 8, he's like, don't be offended, Samuel. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. What they're saying, fast forward to the cross, we will not have this man reign over us. In that little acorn where I want a king, grows up to the full oak tree, whereas I have no king but Caesar. They were willing to lie as a nation and say, oh yeah, we'll take Caesar. We're faithful to him. We have no king but Caesar. Complete and utter rejection of God came from that little acorn of apostasy in Satan's mind, in Nimrod's mind. Cain, put any name you want on it, all the way down through the centuries. It plays itself out over and over and over again, and it's playing itself out in your heart and my heart every day when we say, you can have this area, you can clean house here and here and here, but leave these things alone. Kind of like those types of movies and this type of music. And don't touch that one too. That you can have everything else, but not these three areas. Won't have this man to reign over us. We're doing the same thing. The acorn, doesn't matter how small, is going to produce the same oak tree. So this is why it's so merciful that God, we were live streaming one day, and I said, I brought up the fact that God is going to raise the wicked dead at the end, and they're going to attack the New Jerusalem. And somebody says, isn't that like masochistic? Like, isn't that weird of God to why would you do that? Why would you raise the wicked dead? That seems cruel. I said, no, it's the most stunningly beautiful thing you could ever come up with to do to set the universe on a firm footing where sin will never rise up again a second time. Think about 3,000 years into eternity where some mother's sitting there going, well, my 14-year-old daughter wasn't that evil. Why isn't she here? If you were just a little bit more obvious. If you had just done this. If you'd just done that. You'd have to be crazy. There's no way she wouldn't have accepted you. If you had shown her this, shown her heaven, shown her the temples of God, the New Jerusalem, shown her all this stuff, no way they would have not accepted you. And the little evil acorn would have sprouted a tree all over again. So God raises the wicked dead, and in the full light of, holy cow, there really is a heaven. There really is a God. And I made a really bad decision. I'd like to go too, please. Nobody does that. Nobody. Zero. We don't have to take God's word for it. We don't have to take what's written in the books of life. We don't have to worry whether it's, misinformation or God framing somebody they just had a pet peeve against because he didn't like the way they, talked about him. We don't have to take his word for it. He raises the wicked dead. So that famous concept of what it takes to rule the soul, our nation's founders got. James Madison, when he wrote, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Well, he's assuming good angels. If men were like good angels, you wouldn't need government because the reign of Christ in the soul is sufficient. Because God's got only two, his government, I call it the big two. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. If everybody did that on this planet, you would not need government. Take every situation you want and it would disappear. If angels were to govern men, again, good angels, you wouldn't need checks and balances and split the power up into 3 divisions of government and this, that, and the other thing and this. You wouldn't have any of that. Wouldn't need it. Because we are cobjobbing the rule of this planet. We're trying to make up for ungodliness. We're trying to make up for Satan's rule. And we think we've just got to do it a little bit more firmly. There was an interview between Tucker Carlson and this other guy, and they were talking about the South Africa project. And it was talking about how Africa had gone full DEI. They had gone that whole route of trying to make it all equitable, and so every business had to hire a certain amount of this nationality and a certain percentage of that nationality, and land laws were the same way, and they had it all mapped out because we were going to pull it off. And you know what he said? He said it failed epically. And Tucker says, well, what they say about it? He's like, they said, well, we just didn't do it hard enough. We just needed to triple down. You cannot fix this. You cannot have a substitute for the reign of Christ in the soul. So I'm sorry this went on a little bit long, but this is what I'm saying about how fascinating it is to not just see post-flood apostasy as if it was some random, isolated, interesting event back then for those that are history buffs. It's playing itself out every day in your heart and on every city, village, and nation level. And it's going to climax in those two governments going at it again. And Satan's going to try to pull it off one more time. I'm going to get rid of those remaining few people that just won't toe the line. I'm going to get rid of them, and I'm going to own this planet, and then I'm going to stand before God and say, yeah, just give me enough time, and I'll get all of them. I'll get the rest of the ones in the universe. Why can't I exist? Why can't my government exist in this universe along with yours? The delusions he's under are powerful, and this is what he's trying to pull off. So, Babylon, Tower of Babel, that's not over yet. Revelation's about to play out in a theater near you.